Of course, you want to become a more better shredder in 2024. Thankfully for you guys, throughout the year, I've provided you all with lessons and licks to go along with every major technique that you need to know to become the next Shred-Eye Knight. So on today's video, we're going to revisit the most important workouts I put together for you guys throughout the course of the year. Hey there kids, it's your good buddy, Uncle Ben. Here recently over on my Patreon page at patreon.com/BenEllerGuitars, I put up a poll asking my most lovely and loyal supporters what they'd like to see in a year-end wrap. And the answer couldn't have been more clear. You guys want to know the most important workouts you should be doing as we head into the new year. But of course, I've put out a ton of content this year on my channel, and it can be a daunting task to try to dig through all of it. So on today's video, I've put together my list of the most important workouts for every major technique that you're going to need to know. Now, with all these exercises that we're going to talk about, you can find practice tracks, downloadable tabs, MIDI files, the whole works to help you become a better player over on my Patreon page. So don't delay, sign up today even for just $1 a month. It's going to get you the goods. Gear-wise for today's video, I'm going to be playing on one of my favorite guitars that landed in my lap this year, my Jackson Virtuoso. I've used this thing in a ton of videos and it keeps on blowing my mind. I'm playing through the Marshall 1987X Plexi into the Universal Audio aux. Now, I've put out a lot of videos about alternate picking this year, but I think the most important and effective one that you need to check out is a video called This Will Improve Your Picking. Practice this. That's Weekend Wank Shop 342 according to my calculations. Let's check it out. Now that might seem pretty simple, but this combines a couple of the most important things that you need to become a more better shredder. It's got two-way pick slanting in it, and it also uses speed bursts. The more I play, the more I practice, the more I'm convinced that speed bursts are really the key to building and maintaining speed and coordination between your arm hands. Now the two-way pick slanting aspect of this comes into play when you consider that due to the phrasing of the lick, it involves changing strings off of downstrokes and changing strings off of upstrokes in the same workout. Now, the cool thing about this exercise, and I detail this in the video, is that you can really cater this around whatever you feel like you're lacking in terms of your picking. If you want to just improve your downstroke string changes, you can practice the entire thing with every lick starting off with a downstroke. Then all the string changes will happen after downstrokes, like this. Alternately, you could also start this with an upstroke for both licks, and you'd end up changing strings off of ups every time, if that's your weak point. And you can also combine the two to work out different things like inside or outside string changing. Really great, really flexible workout, and I'll give you all the details in the full video, so be sure to check it out. I'm going to put links to all these videos in the video description, so you can just link to them straight from there. And of course, you're going to get the most out of this by using those practice tracks and downloadable tabs you can find over on my Patreon page. All the cool kids these days be sweep picking, and I think my most favoriteest workout that I did is one that I put in a video called Unlock Your Sweep Picking Potential. That's Weekend Wank Shop 346 for those playing the home game. Let's check it out. It's a pretty simple 5-string arpeggio sequence that uses two of the most important shapes that you need to know, that minor shape and the major shape. Those are two that you're going to use all the time. And the biggest thing that I want you to focus on here is keeping it nice and smooth and keeping the timing really even. It's going to be easier to practice it that way if you use the downloadable practice tracks that you can find over on my Patreon page. Because you don't want to be that guy where you can just hear the first and the last note of an arpeggio and the rest of it is totally out of time and just kind of a blur of notes, you know? You want to have that rhythmic control over your sweep picking to keep it perfectly in the groove. And the thing I like about these 5-string shapes is because they all feature that pull off on the top. It gives you a little bit of time to turn your picking around and concentrate on going from the downward sweep to the upward sweep. So it's just a nice little breather in there. Now, as you practice through these, I really want you guys to focus on making one continuous movement with the hand, instead of like 5 individual pick strokes like this. That's not sweep picking. You really need to angle that pick and let it just fall onto the next string with every string you go through. See how it's kind of resting against the string like that? Sweep picking is really built on that rest stroke technique, so practicing this exercise with a good smooth feel is really going to get you where you need to be. You're going to be the next yin yang milkshake in no time.
I'm your new god, little boys.
Okay, so I didn't have a ton of legato-based content this year, but one of my favorites that you need to practice comes from Weekend Wake Shop 356. It's called Paul Gilbert's Picking is Insane. Check this out. I never really get tired of that Paul Gilbert half-picked kind of sound. Now that's not really just a straight legato lick. You could practice it that way if you wanted to. That's alright. But one thing that I like about this Paul Gilbert style of half-picked licks is that it combines picking, which is very rhythmic and in the groove, with legato, which tends to be a little looser for most of us. If this guy's in the driver's seat, it's usually a little less controlled than if this guy is in rhythmic control, so to speak. So the great thing about practicing licks like this is because there's a combination of left-hand hammer-ons or pull-offs and alternate picking in there, it can really be a test to see if you're staying in the groove when your left hand is in control. So for example, if you're practicing this lick and you notice the picking parts are really groovy, but the left-hand parts are kind of rushed like this. Here, that's kind of lopsided. That's what you're shooting for right there. You want the timing to be perfectly smooth as the ball is being passed between the two hands. And you know what? You're going to be able to get that down a whole lot more better if you use the downloadable tab and practice tracks that are waiting for you over on that Patreon page, even for just $1 a month. It's a great pattern you can apply to any other 3-note per string scale too. So that's just a really effective one to start throwing into your soloing. Speaking of Sir Paul Gilbert, where would we be if we didn't practice on our string skipping chops? Earlier in the year, I put up a video called, Is This a New Level of Shred? That's Weekend Wake Shop 349. In that video, I took a really insane string skipping alternate picked example that my buddy Spiro put up on his Instagram. And modified it into something us human beings can play. Boy howdy, is that ever a great one to practice with the downloadable tab and practice tracks you can find over on my Patreon page. Let's take a look at that first fragment of the lick. Pretty challenging to play. The whole thing is on the E string and G string, so that means the pick is having to constantly vault over that B string the entire time. And one of the most important parts of this is to make sure that your picking motions aren't too small. A lot of guitar players out there are obsessed with trying to make the most tiny picking motions that they can, but if you're doing string skipping, that can actually sabotage the entire operation for you. Because see, if I'm here on the high E string and I'm making teeny tiny pick movements, and now I've got to go to the G, I'm like a mile away. Whereas if I really would have snapped that last pick stroke and used what I think of as a launcher is what I call that. I make sure the last pick stroke on every string is a launcher that really puts me out and over the strings. See, now I'm right above the G, which is where I need to be to continue the lick. And I've got to make sure that the last note that I play on the G is also a launcher, a really big exaggerated pick stroke that puts me under the high E string like this. Upstroke launcher. There's my downstroke launcher. That's followed by a single upstroke launcher and a downstroke launcher there at the end. But in addition to having the right picking hand motions, you also got to be doing the correct stuff over here with the left hand to make this work. Because given a long enough time span, I don't know about you guys, but I'm eventually going to mess this up and smack that B string. And you don't want to hear that, right? So my plan is to prepare for disaster all along. And if I'm on the high E string right here, what I'm going to do is to position my first finger in such a way that the tip of it slightly contacts the B string. You can see I'm not just playing super arched up like this, where I'm not in contact with anything but the high E. I'm playing more on my finger print like this right here. That way if I accidentally hit the B, you don't really hear it. See, if I had it arched up, you'd definitely be hearing it, right? So on my way down right there, I'm always trying to keep that tip muting going on the next string. And then when I go to here, now you can see the first finger is kind of lightly blotting out the B string here with its underside. That means with my downstroke, if I get too aggressive and hit the B, you won't hear it. Whereas if I was lifting, there it is, you hear it loud and clear. So this is a really great way to practice that left-hand control, which can make your picking hand sound even more cleaner than it actually is. I really leaned into my economy picking this year. That's one of those techniques I kind of resisted for a long time, but after I figured out what works well for me, namely downstroke to downstroke only economy picking, I started incorporating it a lot more into my shredding, which means I also made up a bunch of exercises for us to work on along the way. My favorite one comes from a video called "Does Your Economy Picking Suck? Try This." That's Weekend Wake Shop 350. Let's check it out. Such a great phrase to warm up with your economy picking and make sure you're staying perfectly in the groove, especially if you're using those practice tracks over on my Patreon page. The biggest thing that this exercise helps with is the rest stroke. Kind of like what I was saying about sweep picking earlier, economy picking really relies on that rest stroke to make the entire technique work. So in other words, we're not just simply doing a downstroke, then another downstroke to get onto the next string. What I'm doing is I'm pushing the pick through the D string in this case and using the G string as kind of a landing pad. See how I'm really resting on that string right there? This is everything you need to know about the rest stroke. Now what you do is you park the pick right there until it's time to deploy the next note, the C note in this example. I kind of think of it as I'm preloading the next pick stroke before it gets there. And then you just got to kind of hang out and wait there until it's rhythmically timed to hit that next note. And because that last series is really rhythmic, it's going to make you stay in the groove and not rush your economy picking and play your alternate picking really nice and in the groove. I can't remember if I talked about this in the video or not, But you could also reverse that idea and play a single note on the G string with an upstroke and rest that against the D string if you want to work on your up-to-up economy picking. You can see how the same idea still applies right there. I'm doing that upstroke and using the D string as my stopping block, and then waiting until I get to execute the next pick strokes on the next string. It's definitely more challenging for me, so I think that's something I'm going to work on more in the coming year. Hybrid picking is an extremely handy technique. It's one that I use all the time to bail out my picking hand whenever it writes checks that I can't cash on a technical level. It makes things like string changing, string skipping, all that stuff a whole lot easier because your pick isn't having to dart back and forth. You can just use your middle finger to do the dirty work for you. My favorite hybrid picked workout that I put out this year comes from a video called Perfect Position Shifts Every Time. That's Weekend Wake Shop 359. Let's check it out. Let's focus on that first little fragment of the E minor arpeggio. It's like, which Macedon riff is that, right? You'll notice that every one of these cycles starts off with an upstroke, then I use a downstroke, and then rather than making the pick dart back to the high E string, that's where we're going to pluck here with the middle finger. So it's like up, pull, downstroke, hybrid, throughout all these different positions that we play. So you can think of it this way. The hybrid picking note is kind of replacing what would conventionally be an upstroke, right? A lot of players, if they were picking that, would play up, down, up, that kind of thing, right? I don't think that's very comfortable. I would much rather go up, pull, down, hybrid. That gives my pick plenty of time to get ready to get under the high E string for the next sequence of the arpeggio. And of course, as you guessed from the name of the video, there's a lot of information in there about making position shifts across the neck. It really all comes down to finding the spot you're moving to with your eyes first, not tracking your eyes and your hand at the same time like this. Put your eyes where you need to be and let your hand glide up until it's in your frame of vision. Lots of tips and tricks in that video that you need to become a hybrid picking boss, plus, sounds pretty darn cool. I just noticed I got this great looking sunbeam coming in on the camera right here. It's pretty epic looking. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about here is a video that I put out that highlights the possibilities of cross-picking. Now, cross-picking is a technique that I think is pretty underutilized, but you've heard guys like Steve Morris and John Petrucci use it to play blazing fast one note per string arpeggios. It's got a lot more rhythmic feel to it than sweep picking does, and it also opens up some crazy phrasing possibilities if you can get it down. Here recently on my channel, I put out a video called Combining Arpeggios and Scales Sounds Insane. That's Weekend Wake Shop 360 if I recall, and it sounds something like this. As you can see, it involves playing an arpeggio up and a scale down. Now you can use this and practice it in a lot of different ways, along with the practice tracks that are waiting for you on my Patreon page. Do it. Do it. Sign up now. Do it. And as I outlined in the video, there's a lot of different ways you can practice this. You can sweep your way up, and then alternate pick your way down. Or you could cross pick the entire thing. So just alternate pick your way through the entire exercise like this. You'll notice this is a pretty different technique for the right hand than your standard sweeping or alternate picking. It involves making more of a key turning motion, like this with every pick stroke that you'll do. You'll notice that the downstroke doesn't just go down, it kind of goes down and under the D string. Then this upstroke that I'm going to do right here doesn't just go straight up, it kind of curves out. That way I'm away from the strings and able to do the downstroke that I need to do on the next string. Watch the curves. Really awesome and handy techniques that can do amazing things. I recommend learning stuff like the intro to The Glass Prison by Dream Theater or Too Many Notes by Steve Morse, hopefully at much lower than album speed for either of those if you want some more stuff to work on this technique with. Another thing that I really like about this particular warm-up is it shows you how an arpeggio kind of hiding there and waiting inside of a scale. Kind of shows you how the two things are kind of cut from the same cloth. There's some good tips and tricks in that video for getting the most out of this exercise, so be sure to check it out. So there you go, guys, a wrap up of the most bestest technical workouts I gave you guys in 2023. Practice these going into the new year, and I guarantee you're going to become the next Shreddy Krueger. Now, if only there was a place that you could go to for all the practice tracks, MIDI files, and downloadable tabs to go along with these sick licks. Patreon.com/Ben Eller Guitars. What was that? Patreon.com/Ben Eller Guitars. Did you hear that? Be sure to mash all those video links down there in the video description to find the individual lessons that I referenced here. Give them a watch and let me know what you think. Thank you guys so much for all of the views, the subscriptions, the likes, the Patreon support, everything you guys did for me in 2023 really does mean the world to me. I've got a lot of really awesome things planned for 2024. I can't wait to share them with you guys. Spoilers, a lot of it involves the creative side of music, not just being a technical wizard and, ripping through scales and stuff, but actually using these things in a creative way to do the thing that we're here for, right? To make music. That's something I think I've not really paid enough attention to on my channel thus far, but I plan on changing that. So be sure to stay tuned for all kinds of awesome stuff throughout the year, and let me know in the comments section what you want to see more of. Well guys, it's been fun as always, but now it's time for me to start shredding my way into the new year. I recommend you guys do the same. Less clicking, more picking.